someone. And, that's, we go kind of out there with the science, but it's always very grounded in the principles. And what I would just get you to do is just continue on with like the consciousness theory, because I'm just so fascinated about all of it. So wherever you want to dive deeper, like where does consciousness originate? If you want to talk about the global effect, because it gets into very interesting things when you think about, for me, from a sports background, I learned that if you visualize a backflip in extreme sports, you are more likely to land that backflip. Then you go a step further and you have work like Dr. Joe Dispenza, whereas like if you can get into a state, you can cure your body of different things. You have the story of Sadhguru, where I think he said he fractured his leg and then he used consciousness to heal himself. And then you've got stories of like Yogananda and Ascended Masters. And like, yeah, I'm floating around and I'm doing all these things. And you're like, well, how the heck did you do that? What does that even mean? So I didn't really formulate a question, but I'm wondering if you could go into more like, for you, what is consciousness? What is this bigger consciousness, and more into your theory?
Okay, well, I can go into it from the scientific viewpoint of what is consciousness and the structure and how does it work, that sort of thing. Or I can go into it from the experiential viewpoint of being and growing and what is it like to be fully conscious. So we can work at it from both ends. But tell me where you want this to go. You understand your audience and what it is they're interested in.
Well, I think people would be interested in both. I know like the Unify Network is watching right now, and it's a beautiful network of amazing people. And what they've done is created these global synchronized events. On the theory of like Roger Nelson and the Global Consciousness Project. And there's a study of the group of monks meditating. I think it was in Chicago. Somebody can pull that up, I'm sure. But there's a group of monks meditating on peace, and they lowered the crime rate, things like that. So we're kind of taking that idea of like putting people into action in community. And like if we're in a hologram, I was talking to Adele, he's one of the founders, or the founder, he's an amazing human, talking about like if we can project a hologram, if we're in our own hologram and we can use consciousness to kind of affect it, what effect could we have together in group consciousness? And that's what they're studying at Global Consciousness Institute and things like that. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. That might be a good thing.
Okay, so we'll start there. One of the fundamental things out of this theory of consciousness that is required by the theory. The theory has lots of things that it logically requires to develop the theory. And one of them is that as a feedback to this virtual reality that we call a physical universe, there is this arrangement in consciousness that our intent modifies future probability. Okay, now, the future is not deterministic. The future isn't done yet. It's still open. It can change. It can go any number of different ways. So there is probability that it might go, let's say if there's 10 different states that this future event might end up in. It might do this, it might do that, it might do something else. And these are maybe 10 different ways that this future event could take place. Well, each one of them has a probability. Some are more likely than others. Some may be very unlikely, and some may be very likely. And these probabilities can change as we put our intent toward an outcome. Okay, that is, now I'm skipping like 12 hours of lecture on why this is a logical and necessary thing about consciousness. Just jumping right into it, making a statement, like it is a fact, but it does have a logical derivation. But that's just the nature of our reality in this virtual reality. It's the way this virtual reality, physical universe is set up. That's part of it, and it's not just done that way because somebody wanted it that way. It's a necessary logical part of the structure. Okay, it has to unfold that way. So I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about actually logic and science. And this turns out to be one of those facts of the way things have to be. So you can change the future probability of something with your intent. That is how people heal their minds.
And so everything is going tock, 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 all over the place. One thing starting off another in a mechanical way. But of course, from the standpoint of 20th century science, we know perfectly well now that that's not the way it works. We know enough about relationships to see that that mechanical model which Newton devised was all right for certain purposes. But it breaks down now because we understand relativity. And we see how things go together in a kind of connected net rather than in a chain of billiard balls banging each other around. So, in the philosophy of the Tao, it is said, it's always being said, this is, you read this in every art book about Chinese art, that in Chinese painting, man is always seen as in nature rather than dominating it. You get a painting entitled Poet Drinking by Moonlight, and you see a great landscape, and after some search with a magnifying glass, at last you see the poet stuck away in a corner somewhere drinking wine. Whereas if we painted the subject poet drinking by moonlight, the poet would be the most obvious thing in the picture. There he would be dominating the whole thing and the landscape off somewhere behind him. But all the Chinese painters put man, I mean, the painters of the great classical tradition, there are Chinese painters who specialize in family portraits and do these very formal paintings of someone's ancestor sitting on a throne. It's quite a different category. But the Taoist-inspired painters, Zen-inspired painters, have this view of man as an integral part of nature, something in it, just as everything else is in it, flowers and birds, and not there sent into this world, commissioned by some sort of supernatural being to come into this world and farm it and dominate it. So then, the whole conception of nature is as a self-regulating, self-governing, indeed democratic organism. But it has a totality. It all goes together, and this totality is the Tao. So then we move to a second term that is extremely important. The expression DURHAM is the term that we translate nature when we translate Chinese. But this term expresses this whole point of view. It doesn't say nature, natura, which means in a way class of things. It means literally self-so. What is so of itself? What happens of itself? And thus spontaneity. And in the Tao Te Ching early on, Lao Tzu says, the Tao's method is to be so of itself. Now, we might translate that automatic, were it not that the word automatic has a mechanical flavor. DURHAM, as this is called, or Shizen in Japanese, means spontaneous, yes. It happens as your heart beats. You don't do anything about it. You don't force your heart to beat. You don't make it beat. It does it by itself. Now figure a world in which everything happens by itself. It doesn't have to be controlled. It's allowed. Whereas you might say the idea of God involves the control of everything going on. The idea of the Tao is the ruler who abdicates and lets all the people, trusts all the people to conduct their own affairs. To let it all happen. So This doesn't mean, you see, that there isn't a unified organism and everything is in chaos. It means that the more liberty you give, the more love you give, the more you allow things in yourself and in your surroundings to take place, the more order you will have. It is believed generally in India that when a person sets out on the way of liberation, his first problem faces nothing at all. And we are much more sympathetic to the idea that it's pure abstraction than to the Oriental idea that space has some kind of basic reality. It bothers us, too, when astronomers talk about curved space. How can nothing be curved? Or properties of space? Or expanding space? How can it do that? And then when architects begin to talk about the function